communities as well. So my role is very much to work with the community teams and to raise awareness of the work that they're doing and how that is impacting on tackling serious organised crime. So our Deputy Chief Constable, Trevor Rodenhurst, is also the Deputy lead for serious and organised crime across the UK. And it's very much a focus. And it's a very important piece of work as well, because it's the most significant national security threat that we're facing. And it's impacting on our communities massively in an obvious way and a not so obvious way. And it costs the UK £37 billion a year back in 2019. So I can only think that that has increased 2021, 22. The landscape across Luton, we use a system called SOC system tasking and a mechanism for scoring the risk of and the threat that these organised crime groups present to us. So we use the last 6 months worth of intelligence about particular individuals and the crime that they're involved in to map them as organised crime groups. There are 47 across Bedfordshire and 29 of those are based within Luton. I mentioned gangs and county lines because there appears to be a pathway from gangs. There are 13 in Bedfordshire and 7 of those are mapped to Luton. And county lines, there are 19 groups in Bedfordshire and 6 of those are within Luton. And there seems to be a pathway of gang members moving into county lines and moving into organised crime groups. So it's quite significant. In terms of understanding the threat across Bedfordshire and Luton, I've just mentioned SOC system tasking, which is a system that scrutinises the activity that we're taking against those mapped organised crime groups. So we're constantly looking for opportunities to be able to disrupt them and ultimately dismantle them and the criminality that they're involved in. And recent HMIC inspection has rated. They didn't officially rate Bedfordshire Police. I think in 2019 we were rated good, and the comments that were made on a recent inspection were that, you know, we've maintained that level, if not exceeded it. So we are working very well in trying to understand and identify the threats that are across Bedfordshire and within Luton. And we are working in partnership with the local authority and many other agencies across Luton and Bedfordshire as well. So the Community Safety Partnership strategic and tactical meetings have one of our officers presenting to them the threats that we've identified across Luton, and that enables us to share information between us, so that in partnership we can look at other ways to tackle those threats. The presentations that we're giving across a wide number of partner agencies include what serious organised crime is, the types of crime that constitute serious organised crime, and as I've just said, we provide a briefing on the current threats within the force and specific to the areas that we are presenting to. So we have an organised crime group management process which is developing rapidly, week by week, month by month, and is probably close to being at the forefront of policing. But, we are doing very well in our management processes. We're working very closely with the College of Policing to develop our training packages and to look at how we scrutinise the action that we're taking against organised crime groups, not just from a police perspective, but from partners as well. And that's working really well. So we continue to share best practice and we have enhanced accountability through fortnightly scrutiny meetings where we look at the organised crime groups and what action has been taken against them and what the plans are for the following weeks. In terms of tackling organised crime, there's a lot of operational activity that is going on within Bedfordshire, and a lot of it specifically within Luton. We have our bosun team who tackle some of the highest threats in the county, working with the communities and partners, and their primary responsibility is to tackle gang criminality, and specifically that criminality that involves the use of firearms. Op Rowan is a recent initiative which has included high visibility patrols in hotspot areas across the town to deter serious violence, and that's been really successful. Op Costello is a team that was set up in response to Op Venetic, which was the NCA's operation in terms of the Encro mobile phones that were being used by organised criminals with the encrypted chat, etc. So they were launched in spring 2020, and they've got dedicated investigators and analysts who are targeting key players involved in the importation and distribution of drugs within and across Bedfordshire. We have a CSE disruption team who are responsible for identifying young people at risk of both child sexual exploitation and child criminal exploitation. And they develop intelligence through partnership working to disrupt offenders and support those who have been subject to this type of exploitation, trying to build trust and break down those barriers for those victims in disclosing what has happened to them. We have Op Make Safe, which is an initiative to raise awareness of CSE and CCE, and we're expanding that to all types of exploitation with takeaway restaurants, taxi drivers and hotels, so that they can spot the signs of potential exploitation and report that to the police. And the operational work to tackle all of the work that we're doing against serious organised crime is underpinned by various multi-agency partnership groups, ensuring a joined-up approach to tackling serious organised crime. It's recognised that community policing requires a new approach to balancing the demands of conventional community policing and also tackling serious organised crime. And the reason for that is begging has been mentioned numerous times this evening, and there could be many reasons for people begging, and one of those reasons could be that they are actually being exploited by organised crime groups who are forcing them to sit on the street and beg, and they'll pick them up in a minibus at the end of the day and take the money that they've managed to obtain from passers-by. Antisocial behaviour in the form of the on-street sex trade and the sex trade that's not on street. So we term it pop-up brothels, but these are locations where women potentially are being forced into performing sexual services. So, and again, by organised crime groups who are reaping the profits of what they're being exploited for. So there's lots and lots of overlap between what we are seeing in our communities, and we may mistakenly label low-level criminality, and actually there's a much bigger picture behind it. And so my role is to try and raise awareness of that, to work with Jamie and his teams, to make sure that our community officers understand what they are seeing, and to make sure that our partners understand what they're seeing when they're entering houses, when they're dealing with begging, when they're dealing with antisocial behaviour. And we are partaking on an initiative run by the Home Office, which again is a place-based approach to tackling serious organised crime. There are 3 phases to it. These phases are to be looked at as a sort of continuing circle. So we look at tackling the organised crime groups and disrupting and dismantling them, and then we look at being able to prevent the further organised crime groups, gangs, etc., filling the voids, because all too often we'll take some action against groups, and that action can be really successful, but it's short-lived because they're replaced by other groups that are just pouncing on the opportunity. So the second phase of this initiative is to look at preventing that from happening. And the third phase of it is very much working with our communities and trying to build confidence within the communities, with the police, with local authorities, and amongst themselves as well, to try and build that community approach. So this is a fairly new initiative. We're embarking on it at the moment. We're running a pilot, but it is a system that we hope will be successful, and we hope we'll be able to use as a sort of best practice really across the whole of Luton and Bedfordshire. I've been listening to the discussions and making a few notes, so I just wanted to double check that I have covered. Just to reiterate, the begging, the street drinking, the antisocial behaviour and the prostitution, these could all be signs and symptoms of a much bigger problem involving organised crime groups. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes, Councillor Knight.
Thank you very much for your report. Just a quick question about, it's cannabis and cannabis factories you mentioned in your report. So police and yourself, you already know there are a lot of factories and the production in Luton. So what action plan have we all got to stop this production in Luton then?
So we have a piece of work at the moment which is looking specifically at cannabis factories within Luton but across Bedfordshire. And again, cannabis factories can fall into the realms of serious organised crime. The gardeners that we encounter within the factories, again, are potentially exploited by organised crime groups to water the plants, cultivate the plants, etc. So again, we're looking at potential modern slavery, human trafficking offences. But we have a specific piece of work which is being led by one of the detective inspectors within the intelligence department to look at the scale of the cannabis factories across the county and the enablers behind that and how we can tackle that. So there is work ongoing. It's a fairly new piece of work, but I imagine it's going to gain some traction quite quickly. And there is certainly some effort dedicated to tackling the level of the cannabis factories that we're seeing, as well as obviously working with the community teams, looking at closure orders when those premises are encountered.
There's another question. In terms of gangs, and we always talk about the local gangs and national gangs. So the influence of national gangs or London gangs, been mentioned in the past, were influencing local people. So is there any coordination with national police or national crime stoppers like yourself and police? Are you working with, or we are going stopping them there or something like that?
Yeah, so sorry if I've understood the question correctly. So within Bedfordshire, we have our own responses to gangs, but there is a regional response, there is a national response, and there is an international response as well. So it's all fed, sort of goes into the NCA and then feeds out. And as a result of that, we have various action plans and frameworks to work to. And there is that feed of information and intelligence to tackle them locally, regionally, nationally, etc. When you say gangs, do you, because there's different definitions, there's organised crime groups and there's gangs, and they're very similar in their makeup, but gangs tend to be more local and tend to be made up of a younger generation who are involved in violent crime but antisocial behaviour. They don't tend to be organised as such, whereas organised crime groups do tend to be national, international. So can I just clarify whether you met which you meant? Okay, thank you.
Chaudhry.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the drug dealers. You know, last year during the pandemic, you know, there was big operation nationwide. I'm just asking, is that those sort of operation is just was one-off, or is that continuous operation ongoing? Now that had a very positive impact. You know, there was lots of reduction in drug dealing, especially in Luton. So really pleased to see that those sort of operations. Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely not a one-off. So there will be many operations in the planning at various different times. A lot of the work that is done is based on intelligence. So going back to a conversation that was had earlier about the community being updated and informed about, you know, intelligence that they might have given us. Unfortunately, we can't respond directly, you know, to intelligence that we've received, because obviously we have to be very careful about protecting the sources of that intelligence. But yes, there are lots of operations in the planning, and, you know, we recognise that drugs themselves are, you know, the root of all evil, really. You know, I think a lot of the criminality is drug based, and a lot of the lower level criminality as well is drug based, because people are stealing and, you know, robberies and etc., so that they can fund drug habits. But yeah, absolutely, it's certainly not a one-off, and there's a big drive to tackle drugs, and certainly the OCGs that are involved in drug dealing, importation, etc.
Councillor Hussain.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, Chief Inspector, for your report. Basically, obviously, a lot of us are now reliant on technology almost every day of our lives, and most of us were heavily dependent on it, especially during COVID, which leads on to the issue around online scams, the increase in fraud, you know, vulnerable people being targeted, especially when they're, for instance, doing online shopping. So just wanted to know, do apologise if I perhaps may have missed it in the reports that you've presented, and also the paperwork, the kind of work that's been done to, you know, obviously focus on that and tackle that, given that, you know, obviously technology is something that, you know, a lot of us are reliant on, but also exposed to at the same time, especially vulnerable people.
Thank you. Yeah, no, you didn't miss it. I didn't cover it in the report, but we have an excellent cyber department. We have digital media investigators, we have digital forensic units, and we have a department that deals with online child abuse as well. And we have a fraud team which has recently been set up to tackle fraud, including online fraud. And we have an officer who works with action fraud. I couldn't remember the name of it then. So action fraud, and works very much with trying to raise awareness with businesses and with the community as well. It's not my area of expertise. Technology in general is not my area of expertise, I'm afraid, but we do have an excellent cyber unit, and they do a lot of work in that space.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Any comments?
Yeah, thank you very much. Although serious crime rate in Luton is quite high at the moment, as you mentioned that in your report, but we still, we're also aware of this fact that our police and criminal justice system is dealing with serious crimes heavy-handedly at the moment, and sending a very tough message in public through by prosecuting criminals and making the examples for others. And we, public in Luton, they are discussing this in these days. Like every day, we see someone is being prosecuted in Bedford, someone is being prosecuted in Luton, someone is being prosecuted in London, and they are getting quite high level of like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years. So this is a very good message in community that police is dealing with this very heavy-handedly. So thank you.
Yes, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Abbas had to leave, unfortunately, but he was keen to place some thanks to Katie and her team for the work they do in a particularly challenging and complex arena. So I just wanted to pass that on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. It was interesting. Committee is recommended to note and support direction of travel as on agenda. Does everybody agree with that? So that's that one. Have we any written questions?
I don't have any written questions.
And we've no members of the public to ask any questions? Nope. We were supposed to have one.
We're supposed to have one.
Yes. So that's why I was asking the question. Keep forgetting that. Right. Thank you very much for all attending this evening, and very fruitful meeting, I think. The date of the next meeting is in a year's time in March. Date to be confirmed.